So we are up to, the Mishnah on new sugya, Mem Aleph, Omid Aleph. I've only got this here because it's charging. Yeah, okay. Mem Aleph Omid Aleph is the Mishnah, and this is the Mishnah. This is the sugya. Yeah, the sugya of Taina. In other words, we've learnt that you have to be machzik, you need 3 years, right? Shalosh shana. But that's not enough. You have to also have a taina. You have to have a claim. You have to have a story that makes sense, and that's this Mishnah, the dinim of taina. You with me? Kol chazaka says the Mishnah. Any chazaka that does not have a claim, ain't a chazaka. It's not a chazaka. What does it mean? It doesn't have a claim. Ketzad. How does this? What is this? Amalei said to him, so one guy says to someone else, "What are you doing in my property?" And the other one says to him, I'm here because no one said anything to me. No one objected. Ain't a chazaka. That's not a chazaka. Why? Because it's useless. What are you saying? You're saying nothing. You're saying, and I'm here because no one told me to go away. In other words, I'm squatting. I saw an empty house and I thought, okay, that's quite good. I'll stay here. Squatters' rights alone in halacha is not going to help you. There aren't any rights for a squatter. That's what we've learned, right? There aren't any rights. In English law, Paul is a right for a school.
12 years to get full title.
12 years. That's quite a long time. You've got to hope they don't come back. 12 years. What if he comes in the middle? Is that a they come in the middle and tell you to go away? Is that break the 12 years?
You've got to get them out.
Oh, I've got to get them out. Oh.
That can also take time.
Okay. Shemachartali, you sold it to me. Shenosatali b'matana, or you gave it to me as a gift. Ovicha mochrali, or he says to him, your father sold it to me. Ovicha nosnali b'matana, your father gave it to me as a gift. Any of these things, harezu chazaka. All those cases is a chazaka, right? Because that, as we'll see, those are examples of valid tainas, valid claim. There's a separate din, and that is that someone who comes mishum yerusha, he claims inheritance. In other words, his primary claim is the fact that he inherited it, and this is my dad's, right? And he had it for 3 years or whatever. Okay. That's incorrect. He says, I've had the 3 years chazaka, still has 3 years chazaka, right? But he says that the way I got it from my father. You understand? So I've been in it for 3 years, and you're asking me what the story is. I don't know the story. It was my dad's. I don't know all of his dealings. I know that I got it from my father. And that also, and that is a chiddush, ain't no tzarech time. He doesn't need a time. He doesn't need to know where his father got it from. You don't know all your father's business dealings, do you, Dad?
Is there a star?
I think he means the other way around.
Is there a star associated with Yerusha? So is there a star?
I don't think so. I don't think so. There must be. Sometimes Yerusha requires like a Maisa based it. So there might be a need to divide and how it's divided and everything else. And we also have cases of Yerusha where Basin have to get involved because there are minors involved. So Basin have to appoint an apotropos and they have to look after the property and divide it up and everyone else and represent you. So there are all sorts of Yerusha areas where there is based in involvement. It's not straightforward, for sure. Yeah. And then you've got the whole story of when he was given an external or an additional gift and everything else and how that has to be worked out, right? Okay, so says the Rashbam, it says, right? Now the Rashbam is something very important. This mission applies whether it's a chazaka of 3 years of land or houses or trees, that is 3 years, or whether chazaka of 1 day. Kogoin, for example, hanach da amrinon la'el, the cases that we described above, achzik lahurdi v'chulu. Now this we have to look up again, I think. Tavov Madalef, it was a long time ago. Now this is a scenario where you can have a chazaka of 1 day, not even 3 years. I don't know whether you've got this in your Gemora. It depends if you've got an article or not. It's about Vov Madalef. I think it is still in this chilek, right at the beginning. Vov Madalef. Okay, so Vov Madalef. So Rashi at the bottom of the page, because this is Rashi. So basically, if you look at the look at the Gemora first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 lines up. 4 lines before it gets narrow. Before it gets wide. Sorry. Now, Hurdi and Kshuri are basically the different types of beams. So Hurdi is basically to put the ends of the thin planks on his friend's wall. That's not a chazaka for Kshuri. Kshuri has heavy beams, right? Koros kvedos, heavy beams. So one is not a chazaka for the other. And a Kshuri, right? But if you have a chazaka for Hurdi, that is a chazaka for Kshuri. So achzik lehurdi, achzik lekshuri. Sorry, that sorry. So there's a few different versions here. Achzik lehurdi, achzik lekshuri, lekshuri, achzik lehurdi. That's what he says. Yeah, hurdi is a chazaka for kshuri, and kshuri is not chazaka for hurdi. In other words, these are talking about usages of the wall, right, for a certain purpose. Now look at the Rashbam. Rashbam is 5 lines into it. Achzik lehurdi. Kol chazakas alalu, says Rashbam. All these chazakas, the shmaitin of our Gemora, einon chazakas shalosh shonim. They're not chazakas of 3 years. We're not discussing 3 years. 3 years is relevant to a chazaka on land. He takes ownership of his friend's land. He uses his friend's land. And he says, I bought it from you. Totally different idea here. Here it's what we call cheskas tashmishin. It's the usage of the land. Cheskas tashmishin. He uses his friend's property. This is a usage. If I use your property in front of you, right, and you see me use your property, so in other words, we have a wall, like a party wall, and I put, or no, not a party wall, a wall that's yours, and I put the ends of the beams of my house on that wall, and you know that, and you see me, that's a chazaka immediately. Don't need 3 years for that. Okay? As we say later on, it's proven later on.
Was that with the intention of permanently using the wall?
Well, it doesn't really matter. As long as if you do it once, that's enough to say you continue using it for that. Well, he's going to explain the reason. It says it from Darminon, you touched it with cement, it's chazaka immediately. The the reason is because we say a person would not allow someone to use his own property, a fixed use, without his permission. That's the assumption. No one's going to allow anyone to do that. You're not going to allow someone to start encroaching on your property to this extent unless you really don't care. The since this one uses his land in front of him and he's silent, Yeshloma, we should say, or the assumption should be, do not tell Rishus Mimenu that he asked permission, and not some Lumoma, or he gave him money, he paid for it, and he sold him the rights. Now let's just clarify this. This only applies only if he claims that he sold it to me. Now, this Rashi, you'll see how this fits beautifully with what we're going to say here in the Rashbam. Because Rashi says this only applies if the guy has got a claim. He says that he gave it to me or he sold it to me, right? The right. If he says, I just used it in that way and he didn't say anything, ain't a chazaka. That's not chazaka. A chazaka without a taina is not a chazaka. Said anything in a chazaka. All chazakas ma'iri. And it's talking about all chazakas. Right? And it makes no difference. Parallel Rashbam here, right? Makes no difference. Our Mishnah over here, Mem Aleph, is talking about whether a chazaka of 3 years or a chazaka of 1 day, one time use. You see, the point is that you think about this and you think, what is achzik lahorati? You're allowed to put these pieces of wood. He allows you to put the piece of wood on his friend. That's not a chazaka for heavy beams. Maybe he only allowed you to use. That's what Nachman's saying, right? Maybe that was all he gave permission for, right? But the point is that immediately it's clear that he was happy with you doing that. Otherwise, he would have objected. I think we think of that. We learn this when you think of sukkahs. Don't think about sukkahs. Don't think about sukkahs. You know what I mean? We think of pieces of wood, sukkahs. No. This is a house. It's a house. Because you're probably thinking, all right, you let pieces of wood on this wall. It's not a big deal. You're very friendly to your neighbor. You probably let them put a sucker there as well. Yeah, this is his house. You're not going to allow your neighbor to engage in a construction project to put beams of wood on your wall, unless you don't care.
They flimsy house, isn't it?
They did have flimsy houses. Also flimsy.
No, it's solid.
A lot of houses are made out of wood. Not entirely, not the structure, the bricks and the thing, but like large elements of the houses are made out of wood inside. You can easily have a situation where those bits of wood are resting on someone else's property.
You seem to be saying the 3-year rule that only applies to a plan. But all the
No, the Rashbam is saying it's a totally different type of chazakah. It has not a chazakah of Gimel Shanim. Chazakah of Shanim applies to proof of ownership of land. That means to say, that's totally different. Because there, it's all based on the whole logic of 3 years documents. And I don't have my documents anymore. Really, I should have a document. I don't have anyone. I've lost this protection about all these things. This is different. This is a use, a right of use. That's what it means, right? Cheskas tashmishin, it's a right of use. And the right of use only comes like immediately. As soon as it's clear that that's what that you didn't object, right? But the one thing they have in common is you must have a claim. And if you don't have a claim, and you just say, look at the next Rashbam, back in Mem Aleph, Shaloi Omali Odom Dova Me Olam, no one objected. Ain't a chazaka. That is not a chazaka. I think one of our Shithim was going to ask, isn't this obvious? And I was going to ask on this is obvious, as we'll see.
So in the case of the Kurdi, the tainos that you were micha straight away.
Correct. You should have objected. Why didn't you object? You should have. You should have said something. It's so in your face. It's such a thing that no one's going to allow. The fact people don't allow other people to do that type of thing.
You don't need that. So the point I'm trying to, the thing I'm trying to get my head around is that you don't need some. With Toras, it's like a different type of time. Like I built it for you, I inherited, whatever. With here, we're saying you just didn't object. It was fine. It's not like we have a rule in this town that you don't. People are allowed to put their beams on each other's walls, or
no, but remember, you've got to have a claim. So that means to say when you're, again, that's what we're saying here. You still need a claim. You gave me the rights. You sold it for me. Yeah.
And you sing it.
No, that's not enough. No, it's not good enough. That's the point. That's what we're saying. So we missed out the rest of the Shmuel. Go back to the first Shmuel. Whether it's 3 years of land, of batim, velamis, or trees and houses. These are the signs. There are other cases as well. There were cases there about rain dripping and stuff like that, and water dripping off his roof and that type of thing. I think so. Because that's what's Mario is talking about. That the Mishnah said the tzarich liton from where, from what power, from what strength, where is he coming from to be machzik? Therefore, given the Toyin Tan or Somalia, since he's giving a decent claim, a good claim, Shebedin Yard the Kakazeh, that he entered this land bedin legitimately, and through that he then used it. The amount of time that the Chachamim established was their shosak, and he was silent. The other guy was silent, and he didn't object during that period of time. It's a chazaka. How long is that period of time? That's going to vary. It can either be 3 years. It could be immediate, right? And the ma'ara, that's the other person who's now claiming it, says he is not believed to say he didn't go down into my property through me with my permission, without my permission. Dim came, because if so, why did he allow him to be machzik? But you have to have a claim. You have to have a claim. Because if you don't have a claim, that's not good enough. Now we have to understand why. We have to think about why. In other words, in a way it's easier. In a way it's easier if it's talking about 3 years. You've got to have a story. You can't just squat in his land. But in the case of where you use it in front of him and he's silent, what's the whole svara? The svara is you never do that. You never allow someone to be in your land in front of you. Think of it like this, yeah? You have a back garden, and one day you're sitting in your garden, and someone comes along and plants their deck chair in your garden next to you and sits there having a glass of Coke, reading a paper next to you, right? Now, and you don't say anything. That's pretty strong evidence that you're not bothered, no? You don't think so, David?
I'm thinking.
Think about it. Someone walks into your back garden, you're there, you're sitting there, and he sits next to you. And you smile at him and just carry on reading your paper.
You could be good.
Or reading the Onion or the also yeah, whatever. Yeah, you understand, yeah? Right? And yeah, right?
Okay.
You understand? Like it's a really strong proof that you're not objecting. So then the question is, why does he need a story at all? Why is it not good enough just to say, in this case, it's a bit more understand. 3 years more understand. Why? Because maybe he hasn't turned up or he hasn't done anything, whatever. So 3 years' time, as long as he knew about it, he should have objected. He should have objected. But you also have to have a reason how you got it. You know, at the end of the day, you should have a star. In our case, you should have a star. You should have a document that proves proof of sale. And you don't have that. And therefore, the Chachomim said, because to protect the buyer, as we learned right at the beginning of the parak, to protect the buyer, the Chachomim said, okay, fine, we'll protect you. How are we going to protect you? Because we're going to say people don't keep documents longer than 3 years. So after 3 years, it shifts to you. And he's got to prove that it's his. As long as you have like a reason to be there. Like, you know, I bought it or he gave it to me. In other words, it would have been a document. It's just gone.
Maybe it's his friend. He's an object. It's his mate.
Yeah.
I think he's next to him.
That's what you use from the end. Otherwise, it would just be a friendly gesture.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
We shake hands.
No, or it could be what? Yeah.
I've got holes in all the fences.
I know that's the problem. You see, the Hendon Goldsby mindset. People hang around in each other's gardens.
Oh,
The kids, it's not so simple.
send the kids. The kids. Alive.
And now we're getting possession for
Right.
their parents.
It's a secret campaign. Yeah. No, I just wonder whether I don't have my let's see for here. I don't have Reb Steinman here. Yeah, that's not shocking. I wonder whether there's a we need a COVID sure. No, because I'm just wondering whether the reason why we need something, maybe it's because you need to have you still need a form of kinyan or something. You know, is midlo micha still enough? What transfers it? So what transfers it? You used it in front of him and he was quiet. Because he was in front of him quiet, therefore,
Yeah, but
why is that good enough? Why is that good enough?
you could say you're requiring.
What?
Allow you, for example, the timbers on his wall.
Yeah.
You're relying on his wall to help support your house,
Okay.
and he doesn't object.
Yeah. So why is that not?
The acquisition of
Where's the acquisition?
that is the acquisition of the right to support your house on his wall. That's what you would say. That would be the reason why you don't need a previous timer.
What do you mean? That the right of acquisition is
Well,
what?
it's got to start somewhere.
Okay. Where?
Well, we think that what you're seem to be saying is there has to be a claim. There has to be something to say I used to own it, or my father owned it, or something like that. And Gemora seems to be dismissing the possibility you are actually establishing that ownership by your action.
You're saying the action is not good enough. That's the point. The action itself is not good enough. You have to have a story to back you up, and then what the action does is the action substitutes the proof.
Yeah.
That's all it
Well,
is.
it becomes the proof.
Yeah, it becomes a proof. In other words, all it is a proof.
Yeah.
All it is a proof. So a proof by itself is not good enough. What's a proof?
Proof of what? Got to be proof.
Yeah, it's got proof of something. Like proof of what? Proof what? That he's not bothered. That doesn't make it yours.
No, you seem to
It must be something along those lines.
you seem to be unable to acquire the right by acting in that way without any objection. That doesn't get you anywhere. So that's strange.
To what? To not object.
No, you'd think that if you did it for long enough and the guy doesn't object, even if you
That should
don't
be
have a
enough.
claim, that should be enough to give you the right to continue holding your house up against his wall. I'm not sure the deck show examples.
Well,
People invite other friends to their gardens. I mean,
no, it's what you didn't invite. You've never seen a guy before.
yeah, but you've not objected.
That's right.
Yeah, therefore you've invited.
Anyone else have any other suggestions?
No, I'm saying I don't understand why you need that claim. But that seems to be consistent throughout the puzzle.
Okay. Anyway, right. Let's leave it like that for the moment. That's what he says. Now, the Gemara carries on. Gemara is going to ask us. Obvious, you have to have something. Maybe when we see that Gemara will help us. Mishum Yerusha. What is the final case in the Mishnah? Someone who comes Mishum Yerusha. What is Mishum Yerusha? He says that I used it for 3 years. Mikoyach Yerushas Ovi. That means to say, I came from the inheritance of my father. He was muhsik in it on the day of his death. That's very important. In other words, he was using the land on the day he passed away. That's what it means you come Mishum Yerusha. I use that as I worked the land 3 years, and it directly came to me through my father. He doesn't need a taina, says the Rashbam. To say, he doesn't need to have a taina, he doesn't need to have a proof, have like a rationale, a background story, right? How his father got it. People are not expert in the land, in the property of their father. How he got it. We mentioned this in the past. You need proof with witnesses that your father had it at least for 1 day, on the day he died, maybe, right? And then you need to bring Edim who saw your father in possession of this land for at least a day. It could be the day he died, but it has to be 1 day in your father's possession. That you need. So, what's the chiddush? The chiddush is that even though I don't have any knowledge at all how this came to me, other than the fact that I got it from my father, right? But that's good enough. As long as it's true that you got it from your father. How can you establish it's true you got it from your father?
Oh.
By Adim saying that the father was in it for a day. That's proof that you got it from your father. We know you've been there for 3 years, and you're saying, well, where'd you get it from? I inherited it. But that's not good enough. You have to have something to back you up that you indeed inherited it. Does that make sense? Okay. So, yeah.
What's the Mishum Yerusha answer time? That in itself is a time.
What's the time?
Time is I was Yerush and my father, and I've got 2 agents that my father had. Was it?
That's not a time.
I don't know time.
Because it doesn't tell you how you got it. It tells you you inherited it. That's it. But it's not a time. It's not a claim. It's not a claim. It's not a claim as to where it came. Yes, it shows you got it from your father, but it's not. It doesn't. You don't know, and you admit that you don't know how it came into your father's possession. That's what it means in tzorech taina, because you don't know how the land was acquired. All the other examples that we were given, Shemachartali, you sold it to me. Shenasatali matani, you gave it to me as a gift. Or your father sold me. Your father gave it. The transfer, the claim is a claim. A taina is on the method of transfer or the story of the acquisition. That's what we mean when we say taina. No, we mean the taina is the claim is on transfer from person A to person A, person B. Remember, you don't dispute the ownership of the Morikama. You don't dispute the ownership of the previous owner. That's not what we say, right? You don't dispute it. All these examples, you don't dispute it. I'm agreeing. Yes, you used to own this land, and I'll tell you how I got it. You sold it to me. You gave it to me as a gift, or your father gave it to me. Your father gave it to me, but I agree with yours. We've said this many times. The story only arises. The ma'ara has a reason. The person who comes along and says, "This is mine," what we say, "Go away. Who are you? Who are you?" Someone knocks on his door after 3 years and says, "Excuse me, this land is mine." Well, I don't know you. The answer is he brings a document. What do you mean? This is clear. Title deeds from 1953 says that I used to own the land. So I turn around to you and say, of course, your father owned the land, whatever, ancient history, I turn around to you and I say to you, it's true. In 1953, your father owned the land. But
He sold it.
yeah, he sold it to me. Your father sold it to me.
You'll give me direct evidence.
I bought it years ago. I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing your proof. I'm not disputing your proof that you used to own the land.
You're saying
We had all these cases. Do you remember at the beginning of the pair? We had all these cases where did it look safe? Yeah, it's all these all these cases where do you understand? All these cases where we had at the beginning of the parak. Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about? All these cases at the beginning of the parak where someone where we had these disputes going on. Someone said, I ate the chazaka, and you says that was them. This one says it was my father, and this one was your father. Remember, we had all those cases. Like, do you remember what I'm talking about? That was the whole, turned and it's done. This one claims this one claims that. This is my father, that's my father. We had all those cases, right? But the simple, straightforward case like this one is where the guy, is no dispute that you used to own it, or your father used to own it. I agree with you. But I got it from like this. Now, if you come to Yeshua, you don't have that. You don't have that. Okay. Now we're going to leave the case of Yeshua. The Gemara is going to talk about that afterwards. Let's see the Gemara first. The Gemara says Pshita. Pshita. Mem Aleph on the Aleph. They're just starting the Gemara. Pshita. It's obvious. Ma'od the Tema. What might you think? Now, what's the Pshita? The question is, if you have no taina, the Gemara takes it as obvious. Obvious. There's no chazaka. It's obvious. You must need a taina. Now the Tosis is a bit of a problem with this because it means maram. Because earlier on we had a discussion as to whether chazaka requires a taina or not. We actually had a whole sugya about it. Yeah, the Gemara says right at the beginning of the parak. If so, if that's the case, a chazaka that doesn't have a taina should be a chazaka. This was this was the case of the shar. You remember we tried to prove at the very beginning of the parak, where does the idea of 3 years come from? And one of the suggestions was, well, we find shar naga 3 times. 3 years is chazak, 3 is chazaka. Because a shar gores 3 times, becomes a goring ox, right? And we says if that's the case, right? If that one second, right? If that's the case, chazaka sheni matayna, have chazaka. A chazaka without taina should be a chazaka. Why? Because if you're saying that 3 years just takes it out from the possession of the seller to the possession of the buyer, then you shouldn't need to have a taina. What's the difference? So Tosfos says you see that the Gemara grapple with this a bit. So why is it so obvious here that you need the chazaka? You need the Mishnah to tell me that chazaka has to have a taina. It's not so obvious. What was that, Jeremy? That's the conclusion of the Gemara. Going before that, we had the Hava minutes. Yeah. The Gemara's question, Tosfos' question is, the Gemara, if the Gemara asks Pshita, the Gemara asks Pshita. Pshita means obvious. In other words, the din that chazaka has to have a taina is obvious, says the Gemara. Obviously, you can't come along and squat in land and assume it's yours. Now, okay, Tosfos has a problem that it's clear from other Gemaras that the Gemara didn't think it was so obvious. That's Tosfos' problem. You could ask a question even without Tosfos, which is it so obvious? Is it so obvious that you don't get rights through being a squatter alone?
Did you say that the shore is the source of the chazaka?
No, that was a suggestion.
Oh, I see.
Before the Gemara got to the conclusion, which was that the reason for 3 years chazaka is because people only look after their documents for 3 years, and after 3 years they don't, and therefore we come in and protect them, after that time, which is the conclusion of the Gemara. The Gemara had other suggestions as to what the source for the din is, and one of those was maybe it's a 3-time thing, like 3 gorings. Yeah. Yeah. One other answer to this is that he's asking on the Rabbanan Rabbi Shmuel, who don't learn from Shar. But that is not so happy with that. Yeah. One answer Tosfos has is that the questioner here, it doesn't cross his mind that we might step in and make a claim on his behalf. That's going to be the answer to the Gemara. You might think we would create a claim. Without us stepping in and creating a claim, the Gemara asks, it's obvious that that it doesn't work. Because it has to have something, it has to have some substance to it. I think that's what we say. Yeah. Anyway, let's see what the Gemara's answer is. The Gemara says, Pshita, so it's obvious that you have to have a claim. Mao the Tamer, what he thinks is the Gemara, Hi Gavra, this person who doesn't have a claim and just says no one objected, you might think, Hi Gavra, this person, Mizvan Zovnole, Hi Ara, this person actually did buy the land. He purchased the land 100%. And he had a document which he lost, which is the common scenario, as we've learned. So why did he just say, but when we challenged him and said, what are you doing in my land? He just says, well, no one said anything. Why didn't he say so? Why didn't he say how the document was lost? The answer is, a bit of reverse psychology. The reason why he said this, in other words, no one said anything, because he had a whole logic to it. Because somebody thought, if I say, Mizvan Zovnoli, Hi Ara, I purchased this land. If I say I purchased it, even though I did, if I say that, Omidi they'll say to me, show us your. You know what the next question is going to be. So he did buy it, but he lost his document. So the last thing, I want to say is, I bought it. Because if I say I bought it, I'm in massive trouble. I don't have a document. He doesn't know that people lose their documents and therefore Chazal stepped in to help. He doesn't know all of that. All he knows is I'm going to put myself in the soup. If I say I sold it, I bought it, they're going to say to me, where's your shirt? Okay?
Isn't there a migui here? Is that not relevant?
What migui would you create?
Could have said, I had a straw and I lost it. He just didn't say that. He didn't use that. He was telling the...
He could have said, I had a star and I lost it. How would that help?
That's better than saying
nothing.
I was just here.
So therefore...
Just here,
what? So no, what are you saying? Migui... Yeah, you need... Since you could have said a better claim, Migui helps as a tiny, but you have to have one that works. You'll have to have one that Migui could have said this, yeah. Now, so maybe we might think that because it's logical to assume that this is what's going on in the brain of this guy, we should say to him, Dilma, maybe you had a star which was lost. Yeah, we should lead the witness. Exactly, we should lead him along. Could go in there, and this is an example. In this scenario, it's a case of Psach Pichol Elem. It's a pasuk in Mishlei, I think. Psach Pichol Elem. You should open the mouth for the mute. We help him along. Psach Pichol Elem. We help him along. Open his mouth. Kamash Malon. The Mishnah comes tell you that's not the case, and we do not make such a spiel. On the contrary, if he makes the claim, that's fine. If he doesn't say anything, tough luck. But you can see what the Havman would be. The Havman was, it might be that we should step in and help this guy. And we do have precedent for that. Because there are some people we've learned who step in and help, like the Yerush, who they inherit. The guy has to get some Yerusha, who's got no reason to know the details of his father's dealings, and therefore basically step in and say, right, okay, this is the story or whatever. Similarly, a Lokech as well. Lokech as well, based in step in and help. Someone who bought something. Someone who bought some property, was in it for 3 years. Okay. We say turn in a lokech as well. We make a taina for the lokech. What happened? Again, these are all Gemoras about how that works and whatever. Point is that there are certain people who are not in a position to know, like the provenance. Is that not true? Well, you could say no. You could say buyer beware, couldn't you? With the buyer.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Yes, it's not so much ignorance of the law here. It's ignorance of the history.
The history, yeah. I assume that's the case where he could have said I lost it because he didn't realize that Chazal had set them to help.
Oh no, that's something else. Yeah, that's something else. Ignorance of the law. Yeah, yeah. Generally, that is true. Ignorance of the law, where you should know the law, isn't. Yeah, that's right. It's not a defense. That's right. Well, it does make you a shogeg though. It does make you a shogeg. Anyway, okay. Let's see the Rashba how Hashem explains this. Right? Pardon?
Shogeg assumes that you know the law.
No, you can be a shogeg. A shogeg can be omer mutter. That's a shogeg. Omer mutter. Omer mutter. If you think something is mutter, you be a shogeg. So on Shabbos, if you think you're allowed to drive a car on Shabbos and you drive a car on Shabbos, that's a shogeg. It's been called chatos because you know what you're doing, right? A shogeg knows what they're doing. That's the difference between shogeg and onus. And misasek is an onus. What's misasek? Misasek is someone brushes past the light switch and it goes on. It doesn't have to bring a korban. That's misasek. You got no intention. You're involved in something else. You got no idea that was going to happen. Like you brushed along the light switch and it went on. There's no korban for that. But if you think it's permitted to turn the light switch on and you do action, you've done an action. Shogeg. Omer mutter. You thought it was mutter. You bring a korban chatos. That's the difference in shogeg and onus, right? Yeah, it's a classic chiluk, and that plays out in other areas as well. So, yeah.
Shogeg in other words, shogeg is not brushing past the light switch.
Correct, that's an onus. In other words, shogeg by definition is where the action I do is intentional. The action is intentional. You with me? Just the consequences or the circumstances, there's a key piece of information missing in terms of the consequences or the circumstance. For example, I think it's allowed to do this on Shabbos, or I don't know Shabbos exists, but I know what I'm doing. The action is intentional. Like I don't have it wasn't a mistake. It was a mistake, but it wasn't you understand? It has to be. It has to be. The Misa itself was a normal conscious driven action. It's just that the piece of information that was missing was that there was a halachic piece of information missing, which means you're not chayav. You think it's Sunday, for example, right?
That would explain why
I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't drive a car. I just think it's Sunday.
Yeah. That would explain why you can walk past the house, the sensor lights.
Complicated.
You don't know they're there.
Because there you have other factors. Yeah, because there's a psiggration. You don't know it's there. How can you know it's there? You don't know it's there. How can you? Yeah, if you go past the house, that's exactly that's not psiggration because you did well. Even though it is psiggration, you didn't know it was there. Then you have an interesting question about sophic psiggration. I have a doubt whether it's there. Okay.
No, the problem is that there's no way to the house except past it.
Yeah, once again, get to shul on Shabbos.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean go past it? You can't go. What you mean? You mean that's the only way to do it?
You have to call on the phone.
Arbitrary.
You need to try and avoid it if you can. If one knows where there's a light, one should avoid it. Absolutely. If it's unavoidable, if it's unavoidable, that's the only way to think. And then there are lenient ground. There are grounds for leniency in that particular scenario of in a sense that it's a complete, whatever it's lo nichale, you're not interested in it. It's what psiggration lo nichale, which you don't allow l'chatchila. But there are opinions that say for Aruch holds that psiggration is lo nichale, and something hypothetical that you don't want, that you're not interested in, it's not got no concern, it doesn't benefit you at all. Even though that's not so clear, because here it does help you see. Yeah, there's more problematic if there's no lights at all. You're in a dark country lane, and that's the only thing. Anyway, these are all complicated situations. One needs to try and avoid them. Okay, so the Rashbam says Pshita, 4 lines down in the Rashbam. Obviously, the Kimud Ein Lo Taina in a Chazaka. Obviously, you don't have a Taina in a Chazaka. So he says like this: what might you think? This person purchased the land, from the person who's querying it. He bought it. And he lost his shtar. And right. The shtar havalei, and he had a document, and he lost it. Right. And he said, and he was worried that they'll say to me, if I say that I lost my document, if I say that I bought it, lost my document, they'll say, well, if I say that I bought it, they'll say to me, "Where's your star? Show me your star. And he doesn't know the halacha. Leida to know shechazaka b'mokum shtar medus. He doesn't know that chazaka replaces the document. He doesn't know that, and therefore he thinks to himself, "I'm not going to say I bought. I'm just going to say no one objected because it's a safer thing to say." Kamash malon. It's very logical. This, by the way, you know that people are very, very fearful, are they not, Paul, in a court of law from incriminating themselves? They are, right? So they very often they say, "Oh, better say nothing. Why? Play it safe. Play it safe." But of course, they don't realize that sometimes saying nothing is worse because then you don't have you haven't got anything to defend yourself with. Is that true? Sort of, yeah. Depends on the case. What? No, you don't. I know. Yeah. It makes sense, right? Some people don't want to incriminate themselves. They're fearful to say anything. Kamash when it comes to the time, tiny non lay. If he makes the claim, then we step in and help him. In other words, if he says, "I bought it," we say, "You bought it, and it's been 3 years. You must have lost your document." That's how we prop him up, yeah. And therefore, the chazak is good enough. Below top. About that, we lost. My phone died. It's back now.
About some tech.
Yeah. The phone died. It's simple. Okay, so basically, Rashbam says, if he makes the claim, we make the claim. We can't teach him how to claim. Rashbam makes a very fascinating inference from here. If he would make this claim, we would believe him. If he would say, right, that I bought it, he would say that now. That means to say, what did he say? We said to him, "Why are you here?" He says, "No one objected." And then let's say we say, "Well, that's not good enough." And you say, "No, actually, I bought it. That's okay. That's okay." That's not called making another, right? You with me? Another taina, yeah. Because that does not contradict the original claims. You're not allowed to contradict what you said originally. That means to say, if you say something in court, you can't then come along and say something which contradicts what you said before. That does not work. It's a law of it. You can't do that. You're not doing that here. What are you doing here? You didn't say anything. You just said, "Why are you here?" No one said anything to me. That's true. No one didn't say anything to you. That's fine. That's true. No one said anything to you for 3 years, which is why you were here. But then you make a claim after and say, when we sort of press you on that, well, that's not good enough. And you say, "Yeah, but I bought it from someone. I've got a story. I bought it from him." So then we can step in and say, now you're saying you bought it from him. So now we can say you've got a chazaka with a claim, and you say you bought it from him. Where's your star? You don't have a star because it's lost. It all makes sense, and therefore you.
What did they say originally then?
Well, that's a good question, but to be honest, who cares?
But we've answered it, and they haven't answered it. 'Cause he was-
Seriously, I mean, seriously, okay. Yeah, it's like he's got a valid story now. Why didn't he say it originally? Why not? Maybe he was scared.
He was worried he'd lost the document. He didn't know.
Yeah, like because of this. Maybe he's worried. He's got his thing in his mind, right? That whatever. The Gemara is telling us like this. What the Gemara rejects here is the notion that we would create such a story to defend a person who has no story at all. In other words, a person who just says, "I'm a squatter." You might think that we would step in and create a story for him, a lovely story. You're not really a squatter, really. Really, you bought it, but you didn't say that because you were worried if you said that, you would undermine yourself because you have no document. And you didn't know that we're really kind to people like you, Baston. We're really kind.
Why are they so kind?
Because we have to look after people who buy property. Because they're in a weak position. Because they can lose documents, and then someone can always turn up and knock at your door and say, "Hey, you stole my land. I've got no proof." People don't keep documents longer than 3 years. You understand, right? So therefore, that's why it's a logical assumption to make that we would take it one step further. And we would say to someone who doesn't say anything, let's create a whole story to defend you. Says, "Oh, no, we don't go that far." That's what the Gemara rejects. We do not go so far as to create a whole spiel to someone who just says, "I'm squatting in the land." You have to say something. You have to say something. What do you have to say? As long as you say you bought it, we can then add on to you and say, "Okay, you bought it. Great. So where's the document?" The answer is the document's not here because you lost it. But you have to have a story. You have to have a story. That's what he says. Right. Okay. Let's just begin the next story. The Gemara is going to come up with several interesting stories. The Simonim are Anav Simon, Ein Nun Base, because of the names of the Amoraim around who these stories are. What's it called? Revolve. Rav Anan, that's the iron. Shokal Bidka Ba'are. There was a flood in his land. And the flood washed away the mechitzas, the boundary between his friend and his field. And he didn't know where to put the boundary back. So what did he do? Ozal Hoda Goda Ba'are de Chavre. He went and put the boundary in his friend's field. So he encroached on his friend's land. Not intentionally. We're talking about Rav Anan. Yes? Yeah, not intentionally. What was that? No, he put the boundary back where he approximated that it was, but it turned out that it was actually a bit in the neighbor's land.
The boundary was like a moving fence.
The boundary is solid.
So you built the wall.
Imagine you have a neighbor, and sadly the fence falls down, and you think that the fence is there, but really is there. So you end up encroaching on his land a bit, right? Now the guy wasn't very happy with that. Also, coming to Rav Nachman, he came in front of Rav Nachman, presumably because the other guy wasn't happy. Amalei said to him, "Zil Hodar, go and put it back where it should be. Now that we know where it is, go and put it back where it should be." Says Ravana says, "I've got a chazaka. I've got a chazaka. What do you mean? I built the wall, as we'll see. The Gemara is going to explain that he actually helped build the wall. The other guy, the neighbor, helped build it in this place." Says what?
I'm going to say, why didn't he consult the neighbor? But he did, and he built a wall with him.
Yeah, he built the wall with him. He could consult. Yeah, he can. Actually, exactly. Yeah, he came and supported and built the wall with him. That's what he did. Maybe he did. He actually built the wall. So, well, that's the point. The point is, he actually said he actually stood in and said, if he said to me, if he actually built the wall with me, isn't that a strong proof that it's mine? Because he assisted me. And I've also used it for a day or two, and he didn't object. He was shosag, he was silent. So I've got a good chazaka, it's a chazaka sheish motaina, etc., etc. Now the other guy said, "I never gave it to you, and you got no chazaka." Omali said to him, "Come on, who are you going like?" And Rabbi Rishmal. You're going like Rabbi Rishmal. The army you say, "Kol b'fon of the alta v'chazaka," because you haven't used it for 3 years. You're going like Rabbi Mishmael, who say that immediately you can establish chazaka if it's in front of him. There are such opinions in our Mishnah. They are the opinions that say that the 3 years was only because to allow time if the guy's on the other side of the world. Do you remember that? And therefore, the only reason you need 3 years is to allow a person who's very far away to come back. But actually, if he's next door, you can have chazaka immediately because he should have objected straight away. Don't get confused with what we were talking about in Daf Vov. That's totally different. Tavov is chazkas shtamshut. That I use your property in front of you, it's mine. Because otherwise, the right becomes mine, because otherwise you would object. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about cheskas karka. Cheskas karka, or houses or land, needs 3 years. The Gemora is suggesting the only reason to have less than 3 years is going like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel, who say that even with land, it can be less than 3 years. On what basis? Because they say a whole different story. They understand the whole story of chazaka of 3 years differently. They say there's no such thing as chazaka of 3 years. It's like chazkas ishtamshus, they say. If you use it in front of the person, right, then that's good enough to prove it's yours. What's the 3 years for? Because sometimes it needs 3 years for him to get there. So Gemara says that can't be. The halach is not like them. We don't follow those opinions. You need 3 years. Amalei said to him, he was definitely meichel. He came and helped me build a wall. He assisted it. So Amalei Rav Nachman said to him, and this is really the knockout blow. Mechila b'tosi. It's a mechila which was given under false assumptions. At gufcha gufech. You yourself, ihava your data. Had you known where the wall should be, loy avadato, you wouldn't have done it, right? You would never have done it. You're not. Aran's not gonna. It's not a thief, right? Just like you didn't know exactly where the wall was. He also didn't. He helped you because he thought that's where it was. There was a flood, right? So he didn't know where it was. This week's parasha. Didn't know where it was. And therefore that's why he was. So that's no proof. That's no proof. Now, the strange thing about this Gemara is we don't have time to see Rosh Hashanah. I'll have to see it next time, but the strange thing about this Gemara, if you think about it for a second, is the fact that Ravanan didn't know where the wall was. So he made an estimation. He made an estimation that the wall was here. And he challenged Rav Nachman on the basis of what? On the basis of, but now it's mine. But now it's mine. Even though it was an error. So the question is, why did Ravanan do that? Yeah. Yikov din is hard. Din is it's mine. That's the simple answer. It's still a bit of a question as to why Ravanan was taking that position, even though it was a completely legally sound position to take until Rav Nachman proved him that it wasn't. Because he was basing it on Mechila. The guy was Meichel. He helped me build the wall. So clearly it's mine. It's not so clear. It's not so clear. We have to revisit that, Mr. Shabbat. Yeah, potentially, yeah. That's what we have to revisit. Mr. Next time we'll have to revisit this. Okay. Sure. So the conclusion was he had to give the land back, move the boundary back where it was. Because he took it out of false pretenses. He thought it was there, but actually it was there. Yeah. Because he also made a mistake. The guy helped. Yeah. Exactly that. Exactly.
And the whole story is true.
Well, we'll have to know. We'll see. I have to see. There are a number of elements in this story that we'll have to see.
Oh, I see.
Maybe it's Hashem.
It's not obvious.
Okay, so we'll have to see. We'll have to see what's from. Yeah, it's a fair picture. Okay, thanks for coming. Right.